Hello and welcome to the one, the only, the Iraq Football Podcast. Ladies and gents, it's been exactly 724 days since Iraq first started their World Cup qualifying campaign. And now we are back for the final stage. It's what we've all been waiting for. First of all, Iraq versus South Korea, and very soon after that, Iraq take on our rivals, Iran. I'm your host, Hassanin Bilal, and I'm delighted to be joined by none other than Hassan Osama. Hassan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's been a while. Lots of things have happened, especially Dick Advocaat has started his work with Iraq. Exciting times with our World Cup qualifiers coming up. How do you feel?
It's a bit of a strange one, really. In one sense, I feel very confident with what we've seen recently under Dick Advocaat, with the training camp, etc. But at the same time, with the Iraqi football, there's always this kind of lingering pessimism that is there for various reasons. And at the same time, there's this idea of like realism in terms of how long we've had Advocaat, the challenges he's going to face, etc. But yeah, there's been a lot that's happened in the last month. You've been following the training camp closely, Hassan. What have you made of what we've seen and what we've heard, etc.?
Yeah, my impressions so far is that Advocaat is he's doing good work just in terms of like the daily trainings. It seems, I'm not there obviously, but just that's the impression that I'm getting. Still kind of makes me nervous when seeing the results of some of the little friendlies that we had against the local sides, like especially in Spain, 2 draws against 4th division teams is not confidence inspiring. But we'll see how that actually works in a real game. Those are still just training matches at the end of the day, but we'll see. He hasn't actually been tested in a proper match, and he's going to have a big test coming up soon with South Korea next week. So we'll hopefully the training sessions pay off, and we'll see how good of a job he's been doing. Kind of, it's still early days, but we'll see how he transitions to Asian football there.
Yeah, I mean, he's no newbie to Asian football, but you mentioned South Korea coming up on the 2nd of September, followed very closely by Iran on the 7th. We'll come to those games in a lot more detail very, very soon, but I just want to focus a bit on the training camp. Now, in the last podcast, we talked about what Dick Advocaat brings to the table, why they call him the general, his philosophy of football in terms of having complete control of training, having a particular focus on style of play that kind of is built on the Dutch foundation of passing and moving, holding the ball, playing possession football, which is something that's, let's be honest, quite alien to Iraqi football, and it was so interesting seeing that start in the camp, and to see videos of the players and hearing things from within the camp, etc. I don't know how, I don't know why, but there were so many leaks from the camp, and some of them good, some of them bad. There was one player that came out and said that we've never encountered any form of training like this previously in Iraq or with the national team. Which, it's good. It shows that Dick Advocaat is bringing something new to the table, but it really highlights just how backwards Iraqi football is. That this is the first time these guys have ever trained with a proper coach. We can look at previous coaches like Zico, etc., but that's a different generation. That was all the way back in 2011. None of these players were in the squad then, besides maybe just Ala Abdel Zahra. But it really highlights just how backwards Iraq have been and continue to be. And people don't like to hear it, but the league of our league is just a joke. You have 3 teams that are semi-decent, and even then, on the biggest stage in Asian football, they are humiliated left, right, and centre. Let's be honest. Some people listening to this are going to be upset. They're gonna tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, etc. Go on YouTube. Go watch the matches live. Go look at the quality of play. It's shambolic. And a big part of that is coaching. A big part of that is training. A big part of that is professionalism. And Dick Advocaat has really highlighted all of these issues within the national team. I had what I heard, I'm going to be leaking quite a few things in this podcast, so stay tuned for that. But one of the leaks that came out was that a lot of the players, a few of the players were complaining about Advocate and how strict he was in terms of how he made the players go to sleep on time. No phones. That, if you noticed over the last month, very, very, very few players in Iraqi football have actually been posting like selfies and anything on social media. A big part of that is because Dick Advocaat has just basically limited the use of mobile phones. No more staying up late, players waking up at 6 a.m. to go training, massive emphasis on fitness. One of the biggest things that Dick Advocaat highlighted, so many things actually. I was going to say two or three, but there's a lot more than that. But three of the biggest ones that he highlighted was that a lot of players don't like to use their weaker feet. A lot of the players were very unfit. And the other thing was we really, really have serious issues in goal. You know, what the things the Advocate apparently said about Mohammed Hamid and Fahad Talib is just disgraceful, and that in itself plays a big, big problem, and we'll get into that in a bit due to the injury of Jalal Hassan. But yeah, you know, to see Dick Advocaat really instilling a new mindset into the team really gives me hope because, well, here's one of the leaks. I'm not going to mention which player because, you know, as a say a mole or an insider with Iraqi football and the players, etc. I don't like to. I will never mention names, not because I'm making this up, but because, you know, my trust with the players, my relationship with the players is the only thing I have. My integrity as well. So I won't mention the players to get them in trouble. But one of the players, this is a different leak. One of the players came out and said, and this is in Arabic. He said, "Katanic كان عايفنا على راحتنا," which translates very loosely to Katanic kind of just left us to do what we wanted. And to compare that to the Advocate, these players are not used to that. These players are shocked. You know, they come into this camp and they see this guy who is just bringing in a completely total new approach to training. And, you know, I hope it's going to have a big, profound impact. But part of me also says, you know what, we are so behind in everything. Like this 1 month crash course of training, I don't know how much positive impact it's actually going to have. Anyway, speaking of Katanic, over the last month I've had big discussions with numerous players, people that have encountered him. And if I'm honest with you, not one good thing has been said about Katanic in terms of his training style, in terms of his focus in training, no real tactical approach, no real ideology or identity, all the things we've discussed previously on this podcast. Excuse me, in terms of like the style of Iraqi football, the way we play, the way we approach games, all of it has been confirmed to me in the last month by various discussions I've had with different players. Okay? And yeah, there's so much to be said about this, but we'll come back to Katanic later because I've got more to add about Katanic. I think at the start of the month there was a lot of people still complaining, oh, I can't believe we got rid of Katanic, this is a mistake, we're bringing in Dick Advocaat who's past it, and how much can he actually change in a month? Well, if I'm honest with you, the things I'm hearing, the things I saw, it seems like, well, this might be a genius move. We'll see, but we discussed on the previous podcast saying, do you know what? If we didn't bring in Advocaat and we kept Katanic, we weren't going to qualify anyway. So, you know, it's a roll of the dice. If this works in our favour, alhamdulillah, so be it. If it doesn't, then who cares? We weren't going to make it anyway. But anyway, yeah, Hassan, I'm going to throw this back at you. You talked about the friendlies we played earlier. They weren't amazing opposition. But you watched some of the games. What did you think?
Yeah, it's hard to take any kind of confidence or any kind of like drawing any conclusions from these kinds of games. Just as they're just training matches at the end of the day. However, like you do kind of see a little bit of which direction the coach is trying to go to with matches like this, and it's kind of disappointing that we're struggling to score in these kinds of matches still. But I guess the overall play is more important. I didn't get to see any of the matches in Turkey. I'm not sure if they were even broadcasted at all. There were live streams for the matches in Spain against the two teams. Both of them, I think they were third or fourth division.
Third division.
In any case, like you can kind of see that there's like a foundation, like that what he's trying to do is get more of the players to play the ball on the ground, kind of move it around a little bit, and kind of like build some play up, build up the play overall. We'll see, because like I don't like to take conclusions from these games in general. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just a training ground scrimmage basically. So like I want to hold my judgment about anything like this until like once we've played some actual games. And like as we mentioned, like about Advocaat and the way his training sessions are. Look, this is a coach that he's coached at the highest levels all around Europe, everywhere, look, in many different countries, and he really knows what he's doing. He's very, very experienced, and so his training sessions, like they're going to be a different world than what our players are used to. I remember way back under the Hakim Shakir days, Ahmed Yassin was complaining a little bit about the training sessions, and like the training sessions with the national team were a joke back then, and it seems like still the case up until now.
Hassan, can I just very quickly just interject here? You've raised the perfect point, and I'm not going to mention the player, but during the same manager, the player that I talked to, he told me, bro, I got to the camp, and within 3 days I felt so unfit because of the training was so backwards. It was so monotone and like not to the standard that the player had expected it to be, compared to what he was playing at in terms of like club level. So he goes, I went there within 3 days. I already felt less match fit than when I actually got there. And yeah, it really, really plays into the point you're raising in terms of what Ahmed Yassin said, what other players have said to me, this one not being Ahmed Yassin, etc. We're not making this stuff up. When we talk about Iraqi football being backwards, this is not us talking and making stuff up. This is actual professional players coming out and telling you there is a big, big problem in Iraqi football. What are we going to do to address it? It's not me taking the mick out of Iraq. It's not me as somebody living outside of the Iraq looking back and saying, oh, look at these backwards people. No, we say this because we love the country. We want to see our team improve. We want to see us regularly competing for the Asian Cup. We want to see us actually making it to World Cup. So the fact that people will listen to this and get upset really speaks about their mentality in terms of their understanding of football, their acceptance of criticism, etc. Please understand, this is not an attack. This is criticism. And criticism, you can ignore it, but it's not going to make it go away. It's not going to make the problem go away. This is what we've said. This is what other players have said. Anyway, Hassan, back to you. Sorry, I had to say that because this is something that I've been meaning to say for a long, long time, but I've never felt the right time to say it. But go on, back to you.
Yeah, and like this kind of issue of like bad training, or like the training with zero intensity. Like this is a thing that I think exists at all levels of Iraqi football, and we really suffer from it at all levels. Like when you see our national team and we're playing games, like, and our team is like basically finished by the 70th minute, they can't even compete. Like that's the effect. Like when our players, like, they can't continue on for the whole match, and especially when we're playing so many of our games in Qatar, where you have intense humidity, high heat. You need a really strong fitness. You need to have a very high level of fitness to compete in these kinds of situations. So I really, really hope that we get to see the results of a more intense, more professional kind of training that Advocaat would be bringing. I'm not sure if it's going to make a big difference right away. I'm not sure, like, if it's gonna, like, we're really gonna see the effects from the first game, but hopefully progressively, game after game, we'll see some improvements there.
Just going back to the friendly games, there's two things I want to mention before I actually give my own insight into what I saw in those matches. So a lot of the games Advocate actually didn't want televised, and it's understandable. Number one, he didn't want to see, he didn't want us to see the shambles that was some of the performances that we saw, and he didn't want to give away the kind of changes he's developing, the ideas he's bringing to the national team, etc. So a lot of the games weren't televised. Um, the other thing I want to mention as well is that the kind of little stand Advocate built in the middle of the training pitch that he stood on to get a better view of the pitch. That to me is unbelievable because it gives you. I think one of the advantages you as a fan have is that you get to see a bird's eye kind of view of the pitch. You get to see where the players move. You get to see the lines they hold where they are moving, when they are moving off the ball, etc. The problem is when you watch on TV, you only see what's on the screen. But when you're at the stadium, you can look at other areas where the ball's not necessarily on that side of the pitch, and you can see the way the players move and the way they interact, the way they communicate, etc. So the Advocate actually brought that into the training. That's amazing for me, and it really shows you where this guy is compared to Katanich and the likes of him. But anyway, so yeah, you mentioned on like an identity being formed, and this was one of my biggest criticisms of Katanich. Previously on the Katanich, we'd watch Iraq, and we wouldn't really know what this team's identity is. What does this team prefer to play as? Do they like to maintain control? Are they playing on the counter attack? Do they rely on wide players, etc.? We didn't have any idea. All we knew is that defensively we were quite strong, but going forward, it was just hoof it up and tawakkal ala Rabbil Alameen. If it goes in, it goes, and if it doesn't, it doesn't really matter. Just cross it in again and see what happens. So there was no real actual identity in the team. First friendly game in, I think it was Malaga where the game was being played, or I think it might have been Marbella or wherever in Spain. Already after 3 training sessions, 3 days of Advocate being in charge, you already started to see some sort of identity. And I'm not saying it was perfect. That game was far from a great performance. But I'm going back to identity here. Listen to what I'm saying. You can see the players trying to play football. You can see players getting the ball and trying to pass it. It wasn't perfect. It was very rare you'd see the team make more than 4 or 5 passes together. But at least you started to see that transition happening, where you're seeing the players try to play a certain way. This is what I mean by identity. It's about your players understanding the style of play that's to be expected. So, yes, the training games or the friendlies, whatever you want to call them, they weren't amazing. We drew a lot. We barely were able to score, but they are training games. The whole purpose of them is to get the players match fit. For Advocate, this is something that's been really important. He's come in on the last second. Unfortunately for us, a lot of our players obviously play in the Iraqi league, meaning that they can actually spend a month away from their club just practicing. Whereas other players that are playing in Europe or other leagues were unable to join. But, in those particular training games, we saw some players given a chance. We saw Advocate bringing in some new players, some familiar faces that I was shocked to see, but we'll come to that in a second. The main thing I would say though is that despite the performances not being amazing, we have to remember though that this came after only a few days of Advocates training sessions, and a lot of players were missing. Forget the expats, even like players like Bashar, Safa, Ali Adnan, Ayman Hassan's another one. These players were not there, Amjad Atwan, etc. So it's not surprising to see that the players struggled. Now you bring in the expats into the equation, and it's a completely different picture. But one of the things I wanted to mention on this note was this idea of ghira. So we had previously, I mentioned it earlier, a lot of players were complaining about, Advocate is making us train too hard, we're not allowed to use our phones, etc., etc. This nonsense that is spouted about the expat players not having ghira and they haven't experienced what the Iraqis have and they haven't drunk from the water of Dijl and Farat, all this nonsense that you'll hear from the likes of Hakim Shakir and his cronies, all of that came crashing down after Advocaat's training sessions. Because you saw the complaints, you saw the little moans, you saw the players, not all of them, but yeah, a lot of them, some of them actually coming out and complaining and leaking all sorts of nonsense to reporters, to their friends in the press, etc. Do you know what? In Iraq we say hail bihum. Okay, good on them. Because I wanted Advocaat to squeeze every single bit of sweat out of these guys. These guys, they complain about lack of ghira that these expats lack. No, do you know what ghira is? Ghira is being disciplined. You wear the Iraq shirt, that comes with the responsibility of an entire nation that you're representing. People would die to wear that shirt, okay? Expats, wallah, some of these guys, they literally fly only to represent the fans. They have nothing to gain. Okay, it doesn't really advance their careers. It's a headache for them. Some of them pocket from their own money just to be able to get to the national team. I know this for a fact, wallah, and I've seen these players with their receipts showing me, bro, look how much I paid for this flight, because they paid for me to uncomfortable flight with 2 or 3 transits, etc. These players die for the shirt. Okay, so don't come and talk about ghira this and ghira that when you, as a player, you're not prepared to sleep early. You're not prepared to watch what you eat. You're not prepared to run and do cardio. So on that note, I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to start swearing soon. But yeah, I wanted to make this very clear. This whole ghira thing, inshallah it stops. But you know, Iraqis and especially some of these fans that, it's not all of them, a lot of these fans that just sit and watch Iraqi football, they watch the league every week, and they might occasionally watch like Barcelona versus Madrid or United City or United Liverpool. These guys don't understand football. Their understanding of football is limited to the Iraqi league, and the Iraqi league is a joke. So you know what? Unless we change this mentality, unless we improve the league, we're going to be stuck in the cycle of just backwards, ghira this and ghira that. No, ghira is discipline. Me understanding that that shirt you wear represents something bigger than you, meaning that you're going to have to make sacrifices, meaning that when you put on that shirt, that Iraqi flag on your chest means something bigger than you, than your brand name, than your Instagram and the number of followers you have. And I'm going to leave that there. Okay? Hassan, do you want to add anything on that? Am I being harsh?
Totally. No, totally agree. Totally agree about every single point. Like, that's the thing. It's like, when, like, if you're talking about Ria and all of this, like, maybe that may have worked, like, 20 years ago. Something like that. If you're just relying on just, this, just an intensity from the players or passion from the players. I mean, football has changed. Even if you want to just talk, like, if you're going to take it as like a face value of, like, players being passionate and everything, football has changed. Like, yeah, you have to have disciplined players. You have to have tactical understanding. You have to have, like, all of these building blocks and fundamentals there. And that's before even talking about, like, whether, this passion that we say, we hear about actually exists. Because, we're seeing a lot of players, like, they're coming to the national team. They get their first big move to a Gulf league, and their performance with the national team is, it's gone. There's nothing there anymore, which is pretty unusual. Like, I don't know. I think any kind of argument against, our expat players or diaspora players who are coming from around the world to represent the national team that at some level doesn't appreciate them, to play for an FA that actively discriminates against them. All of this, they're going through all of this, and putting every single, like, they're playing as best as they can. They're giving everything they have, and when you say that they don't have passion, they don't have leader, they don't have, they don't care about the national team. It's all nonsense, and it's just outrageous to me.
I just want to add a few points to what you've said, Hassan. So you mentioned, like, how football's changed, even as far back as, let's say, 5 or 6 years. Okay. Another thing that I was told by a player, He goes to me, when I got there, when I got to the training camp, I was waiting for some sort of tactics to be introduced, some sort of tactical training, etc. He goes, instead, all I would hear is talk about ghira and what it means to represent Iraq. And he goes, even at one point, the coach starts talking about Hitler. He goes, I don't understand what the hell's going on. I'm not sure what he was talking about. But when he starts talking about Hitler, I'm just thinking, what am I doing here? Like, what's this guy talking about? Why am I representing the Iraqi national team? And this is the coach that's supposed to be leading us to the World Cup against master tacticians. You know, look at the managers that are going to be making it to this upcoming World Cup. How can you actually look to compete at that level when you have managers like the likes of Hakim Shakir, etc.? Okay, it's just unheard of. It's a joke. If you think about it, like Wallah al-Azim, if we actually qualified to the World Cup under those clowns, we would be humiliated to the point that I think people would turn the TV off. Like Iraq would turn into like a meme. So do you know what? Maybe it's a blessing we've never qualified because we don't deserve to qualify under those clowns. And finally, alhamdulillah, it seems like the FA have come to the conclusion that we need something bigger and better and something new. And hopefully Dick Advocaat is that change. And if it's not him, maybe he's the start of something new. A new mindset, a new approach to football. But, you know, it's one of many, many changes that we need to see. We talked previously in the last podcast about how things need to change at a grassroots level, how the introduction of youth teams needs to be taking place with new leagues, new clubs, etc. Anyway, just to before we move on, we've mentioned Katanich. I want to really put this to bed in terms of the people that are still complaining about Advocate coming in versus Katanich. I mentioned a little bit earlier about how some of the players, and it's not one player, it's numerous players, have talked about him, the lack of tactical training, the lack of discipline that he instilled in the team, the way he was a yes man, constantly taking orders from others, not really fighting the corner. And on top of that, I've also heard recently that this guy was just a massive arsehole. Excuse my French. Okay? To the point that not just he's rude to other players and other staff members. This guy would walk into the training and just be aggressively rude to the caretakers, the cleaners, the cleaning staff, the chefs, etc. Okay? So, let's put it to bed. This idea that Katanich was the right man, he wasn't. Come to terms with that and stop talking about it, please. Okay? Move on because we're past that era. And I think, look at who Katanich has just signed up to be their manager. If he was any good, there would have been a plethora of teams queuing up to sign him. But no, if anything, he's actually gone backwards in terms of the country that he now manages. Well, I'm not going to mention just out of respect to them. So, that brings us on to the squad selection. We're in a bit of a strange situation right now. So, we have a 25-man squad, but that means 2 players will now have to be dropped. We don't know who those 2 players are. We're gonna find out very, very soon. But yeah, we're gonna have to move that down to 23 players. Hassan, a lot of changes into the squad. Like, what did you think of the squad selections?
Yeah, we saw first off a lot of familiar faces. I think the FA had to initially for the training camp they gave them a squad, but for the final squad there's going to be some changes maybe a little bit, but I guess the big change is the inclusion of expats. You know, Amir Ammari, Justin Miram, Franz Butros, and then also some forced changes, especially to the goalkeeper position. Both Jalal and Mohamed Hamid are out from injury. So we've got Ahmed Saleh coming in, Ahmed Basid, Bahed Talib, those are the 3. The rest of the squad is basically like what you would expect. Like, you know, we've got Muhammad Ali, Ayman Hussein is in, Ala Abbas he had some issues with his club, and he's not with the national team for this round. Ibrahim Bayesh, Mustafa Hadi, Bashar Hassan, and then the defense, Dargham Ali Adnan, Saad Natiq Ali Faiz. Look, I could go through the whole list, but it's basically what you'd expect for the most part, plus the expats who finally we get to see them back with the national team, which I think is going to be one of the most significant changes and hopefully something that makes a big impact for these next matches.
You mentioned one of the key things I wanted to discuss, which is the injuries to the goalkeeper. So Jalal Hassan was obviously injured, and we mentioned in one of the previous podcasts, like just how important he is to the national team. Not that I think he's like particularly good. He's an all right goalkeeper, bless him. He tries, but the thing is that we just don't have anyone that's competent as a second goalkeeper. So we've seen Fahad Talib. Fahad Talib's terrible. Like I hate to say it, he's a terrible goalkeeper. Every single time I've seen him, he just got mistake after mistake lined up. Ahmed Basil, there's a lot of hype around him. I've seen him with the Olympic team. I've seen him a couple of times at club level. Again, poor distribution, weak from aerial threats. And now add the pressure of him being the main goalkeeper for the Iraqi national team. I think he'll crumble and I think he'll make loads of mistakes. Mohamed Saleh, I don't know anything about, but if I'm honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the goalkeeper that starts, given from what I've seen from the other two. But it's really, really worrying. Like, we're going to go into this game at a massive handicap. And without Jalal Hassan, it's actually scary, Like with Jalal, when the ball goes back to the goalkeeper, you're not entirely panicking. But with like Mohammed Hamid, I mean, thank God he's injured, because if I had to watch him play, I would have been terrified. Like he instills a fear into you as a fan, and God knows how he makes the other players feel. If you're, for example, Ahmed Ibrahim or Saad Natiq or Ali Faiz, you don't want to know behind you there's Mohammed Hamid standing there, because you know any mistake and it is almost certainly going to be a goal. And when you're playing against the likes of Iran and South Korea, that is intimidating. You're not going to try to play the ball forward. In fact, you're going to actively, the second the ball comes to you, you're going to hoof it, right? So I don't know how bad things are going to be this time round. I just hope it's not going to be as bad as Mohammed Hamid playing. But like I said, Ahmed Basil and Fahad Talib, I have zero faith in them. I hope to be proven wrong. I would be amazed and delighted to see that actually these guys are our best players in the next round when we record the next podcast. But I'm not holding my breath, let's put it that way. Now, on to the expats. There was a list of different players that were mentioned. Amongst them are the three that are selected in this team. Now, there's been a lot of talk about these particular three and how much faith Advocaat has in them. So Justin Miram is a player I've talked a lot about, how much I think the team suffered without him. A player that can actually dribble, that can create, that is smart in terms of his movement, drawing players in and out of position, creating, scoring, etc. Then you have Franz Butros. Franz he's a good player, He's never really had a proper chance with the national team, despite what some clowns might say, saying, "Oh, he had a very terrible game against Vietnam." Yeah, he played in a three-man defense for the first time ever, playing at centre back. What did you think was going to happen? You think he was going to be amazing? No, of course not. This guy's barely played for the national team, and you're putting him in a position like that. Of course, he's not going to play well. Put him in his natural position. Let's see what he can do. Okay, and to be fair, like, who are we comparing him to? Ala Amhawi. Ala Amhawi shouldn't be playing football, let alone starting for Iraq. So, Franz Butros for me is a definite starter, no questions asked. And that immediately, that backline looks suddenly a bit more sharp, Franz Butros, let's say Ahmed Ibrahim, and next to him, Maitham Jabbar. I'd imagine is going to be the player that plays, and on the left, I don't know. I'd imagine it'll be Ali Adnan, but to be fair, in those friendlies, he looked terrible. He looked so heavy and slow and past it that I wouldn't be surprised if we see Dargham suddenly playing. But wait and see, I suppose, on that one. And then in midfield, Bashar Hassan returning, Safat Hadi returning, and I'd be very, very surprised if Amir Al Amari doesn't start. Like, this guy is a complete baller. He's a young kid, and from what I hear, Like Advocate is really excited about this one. This guy is going to bring a completely new approach to our midfield. He carries the ball well. He can pass very well. He can take on players. He can play long. He can play short. He can score from distance. He's like his compilations of goals are unbelievable. He's good in the air as well. He's not afraid to get into the box. I think out of all the players, he's the one I'm most excited about, and I'm not surprised to hear that Advocate feels the same. Um, so I'd imagine that's going to be our three in the middle. On the left, again, Justin has to start, and I'll be very, very surprised if he doesn't, based on what I hear. And then up front will be Mimi, but that it leaves the question of who's going to be on the right. I don't actually know. Might be Humam. I mean, it's not somebody I'm a particular fan of, but I don't actually know what's going to happen there. Who would you have on the right, Hassan?
Well, it's kind of a difficult thing because I'm not sure. I'm not sure we have anybody who could play there. Like, I think maybe Shirko or might be able to, but I'm not sure. I don't think he's been playing. And even Shirko, like, there's some rumors that he might even be tried as a right back. I think, unfortunately, I think we're going to probably see Haman Plata. He does have maybe one or two games in him, like where he might play well, but not holding my breath. I think he'll probably be playing because I don't see anybody else who could really play that position.
I'm
of
just
our best wingers are.
Yeah, I'm looking at the squad now, and the only thing I can imagine would be like an alternative solution would be pushing Bashar to the right and bringing Amjad Atwan to the middle. So that gives you a midfield of Safa and Atwan, which not amazing, but as a defensive setup, they can hold their own. And then you give Amir a bit more freedom in the middle to go forward, working alongside Justin and Bashar and Mimi. As a front four, that's quite a good start, to be fair. I wouldn't be disappointed to see that. So, that might work. It'll be exciting to see what those four players can do together. Um, if we don't see Amir and Justin start, I would be very, very upset, to be honest with you. Just because I don't have much faith in the other players. But we're going to have to wait and see. It's quite unfortunate that these players are going to fly out and join the national team so late. I think they're going to join like 3 days before. So I think they might even be flying out tomorrow or the day after. So it will be interesting to see how quickly they adapt and what Advocate makes of them on such a short notice. But one of the things I wanted to mention was this whole situation with the expats, because so there was a shortlist. I think it was like 8 players that were mentioned initially. Obviously, one of them immediately ruled out was Rawan Amin. I don't know why this guy was even mentioned as part of it, because Rawan Amin Khataya, and I love the guy. He's going through quite a tough time in terms of his injury, and obviously takes a while to recover from something as drastic as ACL surgery. Well, I've had ACL surgery myself. I've had an ACL injury, and it's not a straight process in terms of recovering. You get injured, then you do your physio, then you get injured again, and it's just a continuous cycle until your muscles develop and you kind of get used to the injury and you kind of work around it. But it's a very lengthy, very difficult injury, especially for somebody who's a professional footballer. Obviously they have like very good medical teams, etc. But the human body is a human body. It takes time and it needs to heal. So the fact that he was mentioned in that setup was a joke anyway. Then you had those 3, so that's 4. Now another player that was mentioned was Rabin Sulaka. Now Rabin, he's obviously just moved to a big team in Thailand. He was quarantining, then he picked up an injury, and the league's starting soon. So if he joined the national team and he went back to Thailand, he was going to have to quarantine again, which, to be fair, I wouldn't be surprised if the club even said no to him joining. As we've seen from the Premier League, a lot of teams in the Premier League, I think all of them have agreed unanimously to not let any players travel to the national team for any countries that are what we call on the red list, meaning that if a player flew to that country, they would have to come back and quarantine in a government facility for, I think it's 10 days. So to ask Rabin to actually join the national team, was absurd. and it was not going to happen. And then at the end of the day, Robin was injured anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I've spoken to Robin recently. I think it was yesterday. I was messaging him, and he goes, "Yeah, bro, I'm good to go for the next round. I just need to get fit again." And that's just a matter of games. So that's 5. The 6th one was Osama Rashid. Now, this is going to be a lengthy discussion, so bear with me, Hassan. Osama Rashid, Dutch born and bred, okay, just like Rawan Amin. He was a player I fully expected to see in the national team, because Advocate is going to be mindful of the kind of the youth approach to Osama's training and how close it will tie into what Advocate knows and is familiar with. But the fact that Osama was removed from the shortlist on the last minute really, really irritates me, because it tells me one thing: there are people like Basil Gorgis that are whispering all sorts in terms of talk and trying to influence the national team through Dick Advocaat. Now, we know Dick Advocaat is not a yes man. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that this is a manager who's joined and he's only had less than a month to actually get the team up and running. So he's going to have to rely on people's opinions, people that are close to the national team, and he's going to have to see what they think of players, what players should be invited, etc. So that explains why we saw the likes of Mohamed Abdurrahim re-invited into the national team, a player who's been appalling at the best of times. Why was he invited? Well, someone's told the Advocate, yeah, this guy's good, trust me, bring him in. No, that whatever you want to call it, that's a wasta. Either he's a friend or the guy's a big fan of him or whatever. But that's how that guy, Mohamed, ended up back in the national team. Okay, fortunately, the Advocate saw he's actually terrible and removed him from the squad very, very soon. I mean, talking of removing from the squad, we've not even started talking about what happened to Hussein Ali. But, we talked about ghayra and discipline, etc. That just feeds perfectly into that. But anyway, another player, not Osama, was talking to me about why he's not making it to the national team. And he told me, bro, I told Basil Gorgis, because Basil Advocate's not going to be there calling players. You need to understand that. This guy he's a coach. He's not there on the admin side of things. So who's in charge? Basil Gorgis. Basil Gorgis is going to be the one that calls the players, tells them, listen, I'm booking your flight for this day. Can you make it to the national team? Are you fit? Etc. Now, Basil Gorgis spoke to one player. That player told them, listen, this is my situation. If Advocate wants, let him call me. I want to speak to him directly to explain the situation. Because, the player is aware of the stuff that comes out against expat players about ghayra and this, and he doesn't want to represent Iraq, etc. We've seen it happen to Justin. We've seen it happen to a few other players. All that nonsense that comes out. So, the player was like, listen, just let me speak to the Advocate. I just want to explain things to him. What does Basil Gorgis say? He goes, nope. He goes, why? I just want to explain it to him. I want to talk to him. He goes, yeah, listen, if you want to speak to him, write me a text message and I'll show it to him. Because, what kind of response is that? If you're a player that's been selected to represent the national team, what kind of method of communication is that? How can you as a player know that message is going to reach the manager? It's not going to be edited. It's not going to be modified or changed or manipulated. You don't know that. But it goes to the bigger picture in terms of the actual influence on the Iraqi national team, especially the squad selection. Because Advocate is relying on others. We need to understand this. A lot of what's happened here has not been down to Dick Advocaat, whatever the media says or whatever is being leaked. A lot of it is down to people having an influence through their communication channels with Dick Advocaat. And I think we'll see very clearly over the next few games and after that just what Dick Advocaat makes of these players that have been selected. So, the fact that Osama Rashid was not selected is very, very suspicious to me. Very, very suspicious. Because he was one of the few players that I was quite certain we would see back in the national team. The fact that he isn't was, suspicious, to say the least. Okay, so that's 6 players. Now, the one that's killing me is Jilwan. Apparently Jilwan was dropped instead of Ala Abdel. Now, whatever you want to say about Ala Abdel, his stats speak to himself. I think he's got something like 15 goals and like 115 appearances or something embarrassing. But I'm not going to sit and humiliate him. I think he has a role to play. I think a lot of the expat players like him. He speaks a little bit of English. He just try to integrate them. I think as a captain, he's experienced. The players tend to like him, etc. So I think he has a role to play in the team. What annoys me is the excuse that was given. This whole nonsense about he was not match fit. Now, Jilwan I spoke to about a week ago. We had a long, long conversation. And he was telling me that, look, I'm not fit. I've been out of football for 3 months with an injury and, the preseason, etc. He goes, but I've just signed with a new club. I'm starting to train with them. And he goes, I'm going to try to get 2 games under my belt before the national team so I get there completely match fit. Lo and behold, he does. He plays the games. He even gets an assist. I think he lasts the full 90 minutes. And he's ready to play. But, he's dropped. And just looking at that squad, again, same problem. We don't have a real playmaker. I think Justin brings in something from the left. Amir is going to be excited to see down the middle, but you need something a bit more than that. You need, against a team like South Korea that are very tactical in their approach. They hold a high line. They are able to actually maintain a tight defensive lineup. You need a player like Jilwan that can actually find those gaps and find those passes, and I think we're going to really, really miss him. And the fact that he's not there because of Ala Abdel is quite difficult to accept. Okay, and then the final expat that was mentioned is Mohamed Jahazi. I think with him it's a bit more complicated, and I can understand obviously why he wasn't chosen. But to see that shortlist of 8 players narrowed down to just 3 is quite disappointing. It really should have been 5. Jilwan and Osama should have been there. Osama, I love him, but I think Safa and Amjad Atwan, they're okay players. But Jilwan is must-have player in that national team. Must have. The fact that he's not there is a crime. But anyway, I digress. But just on the note of this whole idea that Jilwan isn't match fit, you have Safat Heidi, who's not played a game of football in about 2 years properly. Okay, he's gone to Russia, not done very well. I'm not criticizing him, just it hasn't worked out for him, as it hasn't worked out for Ala Abbas, as it hasn't worked out for Mimi. We talked earlier in the podcast about our players just being behind other countries, our league being behind. This is proof of it. Our players are going to these other leagues and failing. Look at Iran, man. These players, I hate to say it, but their players go to Europe and they're smashing it. You have players in Zenit being linked with Leverkusen. You have players in Porto playing regular Champions League football. Then you look at where the Iraqi players are, going from Portugal back to Iraq with their tail between their legs. But it's humbling, but unfortunately I don't see it being corrected anytime soon. So yeah, it's frustrating. The other one obviously is Ali Adnan. Ali Adnan, how long has Ali Adnan been without any games? He's pretty much a free agent. Well, he is a free agent now, but he's been a free agent for the last year and a half or however long it's been since he's actually had a game. And yet these players, they're the ones constantly being brought back into the national team, whereas people like Jilwan, Osama, these guys are the ones that are sacrificed because, they have no one in the national team as a wasta. Other players, Mohamed Abdul Rahim, Ala Imhawi, these guys, they're not as unlucky. Let's put it that way. Harsh, Hassan, or fair?
Yeah, I think it's quite fair. Like the reasoning, like especially that's what got me is that last point is when you're saying Jinwan isn't going to make the cut because he's not match fit. It's just ridiculous to me. I think they should have, if they're going to lie, make up something else that isn't so obvious because you just said like you have Safa Ali Adnan. They haven't played a game in so long. Like Ali Adnan hasn't played a game since like last fall maybe. It's been almost a full year since he's played an actual game. He's just been training with Whitecaps, with their reserves even, because he couldn't leave to play with their main team when they were based in the US. So it's just outrageous that you've got this guy left on the side. He's already played more games than both of them over the last 2 years, just in his last match with Orebro. So it's just ridiculous, and it is kind of suspicious that we had a full list of, I think it was six expat players or something like that.
Eight.
Yeah, eight, and it all got cut down to 3. And I think there were rumors from back then, back in Katanec's time, that there was a quota of only 3. So I don't know. Could that be related? Who knows? But it is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't come back to bite us in the ass. All right, so let's focus on upcoming games, because that's really the priority here, and it's taken us 50 minutes to get to this topic. Right, South Korea, Iran. What are we expecting in terms of their styles of play? How are Iraq going to turn up for these games, etc.? Tell me.
Yeah, well, Iran, that's going to be the second game, and we know how they play at this point. We've played them so many times in the last few years South Korea is going to be a little bit different. We haven't played them in a competitive game in a while. I think maybe the last time may have been 2015 Asian Cup for the semifinals. I'm not sure, but it is traditionally one of the best teams in Asia. So they're always top 4. They seem to be a little bit more beatable lately, just based on their results. Having tight games against Lebanon, they won 2-1, but you can score against them. That's the main point. Qatar 2-1 win, but you like that's the thing, is like we can score against them if we're playing against them. I don't see them as like kind of the Japan level where we go into this game and it's like if we score against them, that's a victory. But it's still, having said all of that, I think this is a team full of experienced players, players who are experienced in European leagues. A team that has in as their talismanic player Son Heung-min. That's not a team that you go in like you underestimate them at all. You should never do that. They're player for player, they're better than us. That's no doubt. So the first 2 games are going to be very, very, very difficult. It's a very tough way for Advocaat to start his time with Iraq officially in official games. I'd be happy if we got 2 points from those first 2 games. Honestly,
we'll come to predictions. We'll come to predictions right at the end.
Yeah.
But so Dan AFC messaged us saying the chance of qualification, which games are winnable and which will be tough. I think you've answered that. At this stage, there are no easy games. It's unfortunate we're starting on the hardest games and then working our way backwards. But there's no easy games. Syria are not a bad team. Lebanon are not a bad team. UAE are definitely not a bad team. But we're starting off against South Korea and Iran. I think with South Korea, we're talking about a team that's very disciplined, a team that's good on the ball, a team that will move the ball very, very quick, a team that's fit. But you're right. This is not the South Korea that people expect to compete with, like the likes of Japan, etc. This is a team that can be beaten. Qatar have beaten them. Iran have drawn against them. Lebanon have drawn against them. They barely beat Turkmenistan in the last round. They barely beat China. So they are there for the taking. Does that mean that I think we're going to batter them? No, absolutely not. I think it's going to be a very hard game. I think we're going to go into that game very cautious. Advocaat's not going to want to lose that first game. And I doubt he's going to play attacking football. I'd imagine it's going to be very very cautious in the setup, and I'd take a draw in a heartbeat. I'd bite your hand off for a draw in that first game. The last thing we want is to go into the Iran game having lost that first match, because psychologically it's going to be very, very difficult. Iran, we know what Iran are about. They're a good team. They're a very, very good team. They have very good players. They can really hurt you in the counter attack if we're not cautious. If we're not tight at the back. We're not at 100%, then that game is going to be a write-off. The last game we played, we only lost 1-0, but on another day, Could have been 3 or 4. But having said that, we know we can beat Iran. Iran are our biggest rivals. Our players know that. Our players usually turn up for that, and their players are going to be annoyed at the last result. So if they turn up, we have a chance there. It's just unfortunate that Iraq are going to be one of the only teams in all of Asia that are not going to be able to play their home games in our territory. If that game was in Basra or Najaf, for example, yeah, it's a completely different picture. Players coming in with the fans behind them, Iran players looking around, seeing an entire Jamhur behind the Iraqi national team. It's intimidating. There's a reason results vary away and home, because it actually does have a profound impact on players. But it says what it is. It's one of those things we're gonna have to deal with. This is the reality of being an Iraqi football fan, and the players need to rise up to that challenge. And if we are going to qualify for the World Cup, then this is just yet another hurdle that we need to deal with. But yeah, we'll see what happens. So Hassan, I hate this bit, but what are your predictions? Let's start with South Korea first. You go, then I'll go.
Yeah, my hopes and my expectations are two different things.
All right, what's your prediction? What's your prediction?
The prediction, yeah. So my prediction, I don't see, I don't see us getting a win in the first match. I think going out to Seoul to play against South Korea for the first opening game, as Advocaat's very first official game for Iraq, it's going to be a very, very tough situation. I think it's possible, like if we play an organized game, I think we can get a draw there, which is a very positive result as far as I'm concerned. I'm thinking we can get a draw there.
Okay. What's the score then? 1-1, 0-0, 2-2.
I'd say 1-1.
Okay.
I'll go with that.
I'm going to go with 0-0. I think we're going to struggle to score in that first game until things start to click with what Advocaat's got lined up, especially with the expat players having just joined. Right, now, let's go to the Iran game. What's going to happen there? What's your predictions, Hassan?
Yeah, these are always very, very difficult to call. Anything goes in these kinds of matches because it really depends. Like any derby, it's depends on the players. I think, ideally, I hope, and what I think we can do is I think we can win in these matches, but still, it is still early days, and I think it's going to be a tight match. That's what I expect. Similar to like our last matches, which were like very, very small margins, so I think that trend will continue, and I think this will be another draw. I think 0-0 for this one.
I think it's going to be tough, man. I think Iran's a very, 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 very good team. I think they're improving all the time underneath their new manager. And I think they're going to be full of confidence coming into this game, having beat Iraq in the previous game, and us looking comfortable, them looking comfortable beating us. But I can't sit on my own podcast and talk about I predict Iraq to lose. So I'm going to try to be a bit more optimistic. I'm going to say it's going to be a 1-1 draw against Iran. So neither of us think we're going to win any games. That's interesting. We're both predicting two different draws. But yeah, let's wait and see then. Hopefully we're both wrong and we get some wins under our belt. That'd be an amazing way to start. I think if we end up getting 2 losses, which I'll be honest, I wouldn't be entirely surprised by that. It does put us in quite a difficult start. It wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be the end of the world because there's a long way to go. But yeah, we need to take something away from these games because it's the top 2 that qualify, and we don't want to be making anything easy for the likes of Iran and South Korea, who are going to be favourites in the coming games. And yeah, we need to find a way to take something from them. All right, we finished the predictions very quickly. Let's go to the Q&A. Right, Jafar K7 tweets us asking, who do you think is going to be the free kick takers and the penalties? And I think it really all depends on who's going to be starting. I think if Ali Adnan starting, and I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't, I think he's taking them. I don't think anyone's going to be able to have a discussion about the free kicks. With the penalties, to be fair, I do trust him with penalties. He's very rarely gone wrong with the penalties, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up taking them. Otherwise, when it comes to the free kicks, if Ali Adnan isn't there, maybe Bashar. And under the penalties, maybe Dorgan if he's replacing Ali Adnan in the starting lineup. Otherwise, France Botros, he's got a good free kick on him. He's scored the few, and I think Amir El Amari is gonna have something to say about that as well. So I think it really depends on who's starting. And another question by Tariq Jr. or JR. He asks, what do you think are the flaws in each of the two teams that we're going to play in their teams? Do you want to answer that, Hassan, or should I?
I mean, I'm not sure. Like, I don't watch, a ton of, South Korea's games, things like that. So I can only really have like an opinion based on the matches that we've played against them. We haven't played against Korea for a while, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think with South Korea, they're a team that's disciplined and they're organized. But I think we can actually punish them if we play to some degree direct football. Our players are bigger than them, they're stronger than them. You bring on the likes of, for example, Ayman Hussein. He gets on the back of some of these headers. Ahmed Ibrahim. You get some good balls into the box, and our players are winning those headers. But we need to wait and see. Amir Al Amari, he's not a small guy. He will jump. He will get onto these headers. We've seen him score headers with the Olympic team as well. So I think that's going to be the biggest flaw in South Korea. Iran. What's the flaw in Iran? Well, like I said, they're a good team, and I don't want to disrespect them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get heated up in the game. Iraqi Iran's always an intense game. Sometimes players make mistakes. Sometimes players get angry. They're there to fight and to get aggressive. And we've seen a lot of sendings off previously in Iraqi Iran games, mostly from Iran, who go into that game like ready to die essentially. And as a result, we might end up seeing something similar happening. If Iraq are playing against a 10-man Iran, suddenly things change and where we might actually get a win there. So we'll wait and see. We'll see how disciplined this Iranian side are, if they're more disciplined than previous teams we've faced. But yeah, never say never, I suppose. And then final question from Hashimi ATM. How many minutes do you see Amari getting in the World Cup qualifiers? Obviously nobody really knows, but I would be very, very surprised if he's not starting. From what I hear, I think he's going to be an integral part of Advocaat's plans, and hopefully he gets 180 minutes playing both games, assuming he's free of injury, etc. So yeah, hope that answers that, Hashimi. We're going to wait and see, and hopefully it works out for the team. Right, Hassan, final thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're going to see from these next games, especially when it comes to Advocaat. Big changes, especially with the national team, in terms of the setup, in terms of the way the training sessions have been gone, and even the squad lineup. So there's a lot of changes between the last round and this coming round, and we'll see. It seems. From the outside, it seems a lot of these changes are positive. Like, when we have, likes of Justin Merriman and Amari, Sponsors being added, the level of the training sessions increasing. All of this seems positive, so it gives me some optimism. After the last games with Katanec, I had almost zero hope. So hopefully things look better, not just from the outside, but also on the pitch. And we just got to hope for the best. These next two games, as we said, are very, very difficult, but anything can happen. And, we'll just wait and see.
Brilliant. So Guys, just want to say thank you for listening, and thank you for all the retweets, the sharing, the subscriptions. We can only grow with your support. We hope you enjoy our podcasts. And yeah, we hope you continue to support us. Please share our content with family, with friends, on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on the Snapchat, the Instagram, etc. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to us on, or whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever platform you use, YouTube. And get in touch. We want to hear from you guys. We're always interested to hear what you have to say. We try to respond to as many people as we can, although sometimes it can be tough given how many people tweet us and message us on Instagram. Hassan, if we want to message you or we want to hear from you, where can we find you?
Yeah, primarily available on Twitter at Hassan_O_1193. And yeah, give me share, follow everything on all of our social medias, Instagram, Twitter, everything. It really helps us out. It helps us grow, and so we can continue to make as much content as possible.
Agreed. Yeah. So a lot of people follow us on Twitter. We're nearly hitting 6,000 followers now. If you're on Instagram, Hassan's been in control of our Instagram. He's doing a tremendous job. Make sure you follow there as well. And that is at Iraq Football Pod. Now, if you want to find me, it's the exact same thing on Twitter, Iraq Football Pod. Always keen to share new information there, my thoughts, etc. If you want to hear it, jump on the Twitter account, follow, subscribe. If you want to hear my opinions as well, another thing is amongst the Iraqi football, follow me on Instagram at Hassanan, Hassanane. Hassan, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, always a pleasure, and hopefully for the next one we're talking about 2 wins.
If only, man, if only. Anyway, that's all from us, folks. Yalla ya Iraq.